The mighty divine demon falls, expecting death, but instead, he wakes up in a new, broken reality. His legendary inner energy is gone, and he's now inhabiting the body of a sickly, disgraced young master. To make matters worse, this new body violently rejects the demonic techniques he mastered in his former life. How will the world's most terrifying killer learn to fight when his own body is now his greatest enemy? On a battlefield littered with bodies, our hero stands alone against three formidable martial arts masters. The leaders of the Namgung clan, the Shaolin Temple, and the Manhwa sect gather, with Namgung Huang urging his allies to strike. He's convinced their enemy is exhausted and that now is the perfect chance to kill him. The man turns to them with a menacing glare, his intent clear. They are the only ones left. Startled by his audacity, the Shaolin abbot warns the others to prepare themselves as our hero dashes forward in a blur of speed, appearing right before him. Their weapons clash, and the force of the blow sends the abbot flying back, though he recovers with expert swiftness. Spinning his staff, the enraged abbot calls him an accursed divine demon and unleashes his ultimate technique, the Heavenly Buddha Palm Strike. A massive wave of energy hurtles toward our hero, who charges directly at it. Just as the attack is about to hit, he leaps into the air, dodging it completely and positioning himself directly above the stunned abbot. Promising to kill him first, he plunges downward. The abbot barely manages to block the strike with his staff, struggling under the immense pressure. Pinned and desperate, he screams for his allies. What are they waiting for? Now is the time to attack, heeding the abbot's desperate plea. The other leaders finally surge forward, swarming their target. As the Manhwa leader unleashes his Plum Blossom Flash Strike and the Namgung Patriarch attacks with his Thunder Rolling Strike, their combined power slams into the MC. He coughs up a spray of blood as Namgung Huang roars for him to die. Seeing his opening, the abbot lunges toward the falling MC, spinning his staff for a final, merciful blow, praying for his soul's rebirth in paradise. But just as the attack is about to land, the MC twists impossibly in midair, dodging the strike and leaving the abbot completely stunned. Suspended in the air, the MC reaches out a hand as energy gathers, and then blood splatters everywhere. The abbot's head explodes, his body crumpling to the ground as the other leaders watch in horror. With a menacing presence, the MC stands holding the abbot's dangling spine and coldly asks who's next. The Manhwa and Namgung leaders are paralyzed with terror, their minds screaming the same thought: he's a monster. The Namgung Patriarch charges forward but quickly yells for a retreat as the Manhwa leader uses a lightning-fast skill to intercept. Their swords clash, and the leader grunts from the sheer force of the impact. This was the divine demon, Jeong Cheon, the man who single-handedly drenched the plains in blood. All the great sects had gathered to stop him, yet even their mighty alliance was being driven to the brink of collapse by the one whose strength was deemed the greatest under heaven. As their swords clashed, Jeong Cheon taunted Zhang Guang, asking if he prepared his grave. Straining against the force, Zhang Guang retorted that the grave was ready, but it was for Jeong Cheon. He then unleashed his Plum Blossom Rain technique, manifesting a colossal tree whose roots shot out to ensnare the divine demon. For a moment, Jeong Cheon was trapped. A fleeting vision flashed across his mind, the memory: two innocent children and a woman, those he swore to protect. His eyes blazed red with renewed purpose. He couldn't die yet. With a roar, he unleashed the fifth form of his demonic spirit sword art, the Black Dragon Execution, completely obliterating the tree. The backlash sent Zhang Guang flying, screaming as he coughed up blood. But just as one enemy fell, another struck. The Namgung Patriarch ambushed him with the Infinite Emperor's sword art, carving intricate, agonizing lines of energy into his body. The pain was excruciating, causing his veins to bulge, and he cursed the Namgung rat for the attack. But could a little pain truly stop a man with everything to lose? Another image of kids and the girl, their clothes stained with blood, solidified his resolve. He grit his teeth and charged through the pain, claiming the attack merely tickled, which left the Patriarch completely stunned. Jeong Cheon raised his sword high, gathering a terrifying amount of energy before unleashing a massive slash that tore through his opponent. The attack shredded Namgung Huang, sending him hurtling back with a scream, cursing Jeong Cheon as a demonic bastard. Yet even as he was thrown, the Patriarch skillfully flipped in midair, repositioning his sword ready for the next clash. Lightning erupted from Namgung Huang, ricocheting off the walls and trapping Jeong Cheon in a blinding cage of light. Appearing from the glare, Namgung lunged forward, his sword crackling with energy as he screamed for Jeong Cheon to finally die. He drove his blade deep into Jeong Cheon's back, yelling with excitement that this was the end of his stubborn life. But instead of collapsing, Jeong Cheon's eyes flared red, his teeth gritting in agony. As a memory of a girl with young children sharpened in his mind, his resolve hardened. While Namgung pushed the blade deeper, Jeong Cheon calmly declared it was time to finish things, leaving his attacker stunned. How could he still be talking? With the roar of a madman, spitting blood, Jeong Cheon grabbed the blade, vowing to end their cursed entanglement once and for all. In a shocking move, he drove the sword deeper into his own body, impaling Namgung Huang right through the heart. The force of the blow sent Namgung stumbling back in confused pain. Jeong Cheon then ripped the sword from his own chest, and with a swift, brutal spin, he slashed straight through Namgung's neck. As his head flew through the air, Namgung's vision faded to black. His last thoughts were filled with disbelief. He had pierced Jeong Cheon's heart, so how was he still standing? He realized with dawning horror that his foe had surpassed the limits of man, becoming something more, a divine demon. With Namgung Huang's death, the Nine Great Sects were officially annihilated, leaving a battlefield of bodies. Standing amidst the carnage, his hand trembling on his bloody sword, Jeong Cheon whispered the names Yeonhwa, Seok, and Young, wondering if what he had done was enough. As Jeong Cheon stood on that lonely battlefield, his life began to flash before his eyes. It started with a memory of being a bullied child, mocked for his arrogance as a strange hand reached out to him. The hand grabbed the MC, lifting him up. It was a wanderer impressed by the MC's skill, who later became his teacher. Now, seeing his master's youthful face again after so long, the MC remembered where it all began, his journey in Miram, born from countless brawls. He recalled being a homeless wanderer, surviving through brutal brawls with only a single sword to rely on. His life was an endless, meaningless cycle of slaughter, killing just to see another day. Standing over countless bodies, he was haunted by a single question. Could a life like his ever have meaning? His thoughts then drifted to her, the woman who understood his hollow existence. She told him how she also fought daily battles in the market, treating everyone as an enemy just to survive while struggling to care for her younger siblings. It was exhausting, she admitted, but after losing her parents, those children became her reason for living. With a gentle smile, she had asked him to find his own meaning too. Was this what she meant? Snapping back to the present, a gut-wrenching scream tore from his throat. He collapsed, crying out that all he ever wanted was to live with them. They were the ones who gave him, a man who only knew how to kill, a reason to exist. For 15 long years, he walked a blood-soaked path of vengeance, his body collecting wounds as his sword grew dull. He gave everything for this revenge, but for what? As he remembered her face, the devastating truth finally dawned on him. The meaning of his life wasn't at the end of this bloody trail. It had been with him all along. Looking at the faintly rising sun, Jeong Cheon finally lowered his sword. His quest was over. The divine demon, Jeong Cheon, was no more. Just as he closed his eyes, ready for the end, a loud argument shattered the silence. Annoyed by the racket, he opened his eyes, wondering if this was what hell sounded like. Before him stood a red-headed woman and a man, arguing about inheriting the Flanghua clan's secret martial arts. The woman insisted that since his elder brother had an accident, her son should be the successor. Suddenly, he was overwhelmed with confusion. He was in a younger body. How could this be happening? Two small children, a boy and a girl, fiercely defended him. The boy declared his brother was still alive, and the girl added that their grandfather's legacy must remain within the clan. As he stared at the kids, a strange sense of familiarity washed over him. A smirking man then stepped forward, approaching them with a proposal. He offered to wager money against the clan's entire martial arts legacy in a duel, with the winner taking everything. The kids immediately rejected the obvious trick, pointing out that their brother couldn't even train due to his condition. Tired of all the noise, our hero finally spoke up, cutting through the chatter. With a firm gaze that confused the children, he asked who this Huamujin person was, before calmly declaring that he is the divine demon Jeong Cheon. The man, Chongdobo of the Cheonghua merchant group, scoffed at the title, finding the claim utterly ridiculous. As the two kids with Jeong Cheon cringed in embarrassment, a red-headed woman approached. She was Bu Choyong, the master of the merchant group, and she looked down on Jeong Cheon with pity, declaring his madness was a sign that the Flamehua clan's fate was sealed. Without waiting for a response, Bu Choyong took his silence as acceptance for a duel, excitedly setting the date and location. Jeong Dobo turned back to Jeong Cheon with a smirk, warning the so-called divine demon about the consequences of breaking a martial artist's promise. And just like that, they left, leaving the kids in a panic. The girl's voice trembled with fear, reminding Jeong Cheon that he'd never even swung a sword before. How could he possibly fight? Jeong Cheon just found this hilarious. He scoffed at her worry, boasting that with just a single burst of his inner energy, he could easily handle a beginner like Chongdobo. He placed a hand over his dantian to demonstrate, but his confidence suddenly shattered. His eyes widened in shock. It was gone. A cold dread washed over him as he realized he didn't have a single ounce of inner energy. He broke down, frantically questioning what was wrong with this frail, weak body that could barely even hold a sword. Seeing him fall apart, the girl begged her brother to snap out of his madness, completely unaware of the horrifying truth he had just discovered. The girl's tears streamed down her face as she called him a fool for quietly enduring such treatment. Her brother immediately jumped to his defense, demanding she apologize, but she flatly refused. Instead, she unleashed a devastating accusation, screaming that it was all his fault their mother and father were dead. The words struck Jeon like a physical blow, leaving him utterly silent as the girl turned and fled. Her brother simply explained that she often lost herself like that and asked for understanding before leaving Jeon completely alone. Standing there, bewildered, Jeon couldn't believe even these children saw him as a madman. The whole situation felt absurd. Later that day, he stood before an altar, his thoughts drifting back to his past life. He could still feel the phantom sensation of his sword slicing through the Namgoon clan's patriarch and the sharp, breathtaking pain of his own heart being pierced. He had achieved his vengeance and should have died peacefully. So why was he now trapped in this weak, broken body? The frustration became unbearable, and he collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. How did this happen? And who were those children who so closely resembled Seok and Young? Just as he was spiraling, a servant rushed toward him, frantic with worry about him being out in his frail condition. Jeon, having no memory of the man, simply asked who he was. The servant, Ma Sok, sighed, assuming it was another seizure of madness. He patiently introduced himself as a vassal of the Hua clan and explained that Jeon was Hua Mujin, a once talented prodigy who became their clan leader at just 23. And get this, he then added that this was the 6,205th time he'd had to explain it all. Jeon wasn't buying it. If he was so great, he demanded to know why his energy core was shattered and why everyone treated him like a lunatic. As Ma Sok hesitated to answer, the scene shifted, beginning a story from 17 years ago. The story flashes back 17 years, revealing a 6-year-old Hua Mujin and a 9-year-old Chung Dobo. Young Mujin respectfully proposed a fair duel, and Dobo agreed, promising they would fight squarely without using any inner energy. While their family's elders were away, the two children began their spar, trading skillful blows and deflecting each other's attacks. Mujin was impressed, realizing Dobo was blocking every single one of his strikes. They paused for a moment, and Dobo praised Mujin's honest, unarmed skill, calling him a promising genius. Confused by the sudden compliment, Mujin was caught completely off guard. Dobo, calling him a fool, suddenly gathered his inner energy and launched a powerful punch. The blow sent Mujin flying, and he crashed to the ground, spitting blood. Stunned, he asked Dobo why he broke their promise and used the devastating 7 wounds fist strike. Dobo coldly approached him, questioning if Mujin still considered him a friend. He explained that the technique has crippling after effects from just one hit, casually mentioning he'd already tested it on a senior brother who was now bedridden. Before Mujin could process the betrayal, Dobo gathered his energy again and delivered another brutal blow. Snapping back to the present, Jeon finally understood. Everyone thought he was insane because they believed his condition was a side effect of that vicious attack. He seized with rage, recalling Dobo's recent shameless challenge. The man had crippled him, shattered his energy core, and then had the nerve to demand a duel for his clan's entire martial arts legacy. Still seething, Mujin turned to Ma Sok, demanding to know how the clan could have handled that bastard Dobo so poorly for things to end up this way. Ma Sok hesitated before revealing the devastating truth. It was the decision of the former clan patriarch, Mujin's own father. He explained that Dobo, though a cousin, was also the son of the powerful Cheonghwa merchant group's leader, one of the top 10 in the Central Plains. To avoid a larger conflict, his father had simply given Dobo a stern scolding and let the matter drop. Mujin was floored. His own son was crippled by the 7 wounds fist, and his father ended it with just a scolding? What kind of pathetic household was this? He grimly asked where his parents were now. Ma Sok's sad expression was all the answer he needed as he explained that Mujin's condition only worsened over time. They entered a large, quiet room where Mujin came face to face with the memorial altars for his mother and father. The heartbreaking story tumbled out. His father had gone deep into debt, desperately trying to cure him. But 9 years ago, his mother's illness took her, and 3 years later, his father, crushed by the financial burden, followed her. A painful memory surfaced of his parents' funeral, where whispers from the crowd branded him a child who ruined his clan and killed his parents. The Flame Hua clan's reputation was shattered, leaving only debts, a couple of loyal retainers, and his younger siblings, Dojin and Soyeon. The memory of his sister's furious words echoed in his mind that it was all his fault their parents were dead. Staring at the altars, a wave of understanding washed over him. One sickness had destroyed an entire household. No wonder his sister was so furious. Later that night, alone in his room, Mujin pieced together information from the history books. He finally closed a book, the truth settling in his mind. As the divine demon Jeong Cheon, he had died in battle 30 years ago. Now, the vivid sensations of the world confirmed this was his new reality. He inhabited the body of Hua Mujin, the eldest son of the Flame Hua clan, a lunatic with no energy core. Reflecting on his past, Mujin felt a sense of peace. He had already killed those who needed to be killed and left no regrets behind. As he looked at heartfelt drawings from his new siblings, Dojin and Soyeon, their tragic situation reminded him of two other children he once knew. A new resolve formed within him. He decided to fully embrace this new life and help these kids, even if just a little. But what was his biggest obstacle? The Changhua merchant group, the very people who crippled this body and ruined the clan. He knew he had to prepare for his duel with Cheongdobo, set for 2 months away, which meant rebuilding his strength from the ground up. Accepting that he had to start over, Mujin sat alone in his room. The moment reminded him of when he first learned martial arts, a time when even breathing was a struggle. He took a deep breath and began to gather his inner energy. To his surprise, it came almost too easily. This body had an extraordinary natural aptitude for martial arts. He didn't even need to focus on sensing the energy, he just had to close his eyes and it would gather. An immense power began to swirl within and around him, until it suddenly burst outward, shattering the room and sending a shockwave through the estate. The explosion and his pained scream brought the elders and Ma Sok rushing to his side, finding him collapsed on the floor. Elder Joe checked his pulse and, for a fleeting, joyful moment, thought Mujin was finally dead. With a grim expression, he quickly corrected himself, admitting that Mujin was perfectly fine. In fact, his pulse was stronger than ever. Just as the elder grumbled about this, Mujin grabbed his hand with surprising strength. He weakly asked what was wrong with his body, explaining that the pain of trying to form an energy core was excruciating. Elder Joe could only stare back in utter shock. Screaming in agony, Mujin demanded to know if his body had some kind of special constitution. Elder Joe, with a hint of annoyance, confirmed his suspicion. He possessed the heavenly martial body, a rare constitution chosen by the heavens, or so a Shaolin monk had once told him. The news was devastating. Mujin couldn't believe it, accusing the elder of laughing at his misfortune before spitting up blood. The irony was just too cruel. This body, meant for righteous arts, was the absolute worst for practicing demonic techniques. As Ma Sok rushed to help the collapsing young master, Mujin explained the horrifying truth. A body of pure, upright energy attempting to cultivate demonic arts would suffer immense pain and could even die. Of all the countless heavenly constitutions he could have been born with, why this one? Lying on the ground, his mind raced with panic. The duel was just over a month away, and his situation was dire. He weakly asked Ma Sok to identify the two old men watching him so calmly. They were the clan's chief steward, Do Baekshin, and Elder Joe Hwanbong. Their complete lack of concern as the eldest son collapsed was infuriating, and his anger spiked when he overheard Elder Joe telling the steward they should prepare themselves for the worst. After a few rainy days at the Hua estate, Mujin finally awakens after being unconscious for 3 whole days. His loyal servant, Ma Sok, is frantic with worry, but Mujin is already up and walking, brushing off his concerns. He quietly curses his own weak body, frustrated that he was laid up for so long when he has a duel to prepare for. Annoyed by Ma Sok's fussing, he silences him and gets straight to the point: he needs a sword. Ma Sok anxiously explains their dire situation. They can barely afford their next meal, let alone a weapon. Stunned, Mujin questions if the house is truly empty of funds. Ma Sok confirms the worst. They're deeply in debt to a loan syndicate, and thanks to outrageous interest rates, their debts have become enormous. A truly fallen family. Realizing their financial ruin must be handled first, Mujin leans in with a reckless glint in his eye, suggesting they just borrow a little more. Ma Sok is horrified, but Mujin dismisses his protests. He instructs him to send a letter to the elders telling them he's simply gone for a walk. Elsewhere, Steward Do trembles with rage upon hearing that Mujin has gone to the loan syndicate yet again. Elder Joe seems unbothered, assuming they'll just turn him away, but the steward knows the real danger lies in provoking such a lawless group. At the entrance of the syndicate's estate, a massive guard blocked their path. Hua Mujin introduced himself and requested an audience with the syndicate's leader. The guard, assuming Mujin had come to gamble, dismissed him impatiently and told him to behave and leave quietly. Mujin, clearly unimpressed, challenged the guard's authority and demanded he summon someone higher up. Taking offense, the guard stepped forward aggressively, calling Mujin a troublemaker. Ma Sok quickly stepped in, apologizing in an attempt to calm the situation, but before the tension could ease, someone suddenly interrupted. At that, the deputy leader of the loan syndicate, Ma Jungbo, steps forward asking why Mujin wants to meet their leader. Mujin's reply is simple and audacious: to borrow more money. Jungbo notes that if he's just a customer, there's no need to bother the leader, and with a seemingly friendly gesture, he invites them inside. As they're led down a suspicious path, Ma Sok's stomach sinks with a bad feeling, and he begs his young master to turn back. Mujin, however, dismisses his fears, questioning why they'd leave after coming all this way. Nervously, Ma Sok explains a terrifying rumor he heard about two of the Syndicate's assassins who mastered a deadly technique, the Twin Ruinous Force Moon-Slaying Heaven technique. They were said to have sliced a man's chest open in the blink of an eye. Mujin seems completely unfazed by the technique's dramatic name, casually asking what he's supposed to do about it. Just then, Youngbo reappears, laughing that the servant is quicker on the uptake than his master, before ominously declaring it's far too late to turn back now. Suddenly, swords are drawn and guards surround them. Ma Sok instantly drops to the ground in terror as Youngbo gives the order to begin. Unflinching, Mujin calmly asks if this ambush was their intention from the start. Jungbo admits they couldn't just kill the Yeonhwa clan's eldest son out in the open, and proceeds to mock Mujin's shamelessness, comparing him to his parents who also failed to pay their debts. While Ma Sok begs for mercy, Mujin is struck by the insult, quietly stating he never had parents. For a brief moment, he'd mistaken this life for his past one. Jungbo orders his men to just rough him up a bit, and a guard immediately grabs Mujin from behind, throwing him into the air with a cry of "Die!" Ma Sok screams in horror, but in a flash, Mujin twists midair, grabs the guard's arm, and prepares his counterattack. With incredible speed, Mujin twists his body, locking his leg around the guard's arm and snapping it with a sickening crack. The man screams in agony, rolling on the ground as Mujin coolly mocks him for being so soft. Looking at his own hand, Mujin knows that with his weakened body, this indirect method of fighting is far better than a direct confrontation. Furious, Ma Jungbo demands to know what his men are doing and orders them to finish it quickly. The other guards rush forward, swinging their swords, but Mujin moves like a phantom, expertly dodging every single slash. One guard grows frustrated, calling him a slippery eel. Realizing his lack of strength makes movement arts his best option, Mujin sees his opening. He lunges forward, smashing his head into a guard's face. As the second guard falls, another one joins the fray, swinging his sword at Mujin, who flips into a surprising handstand to evade the attack. From his inverted position, Mujin delivers a powerful kick, sending the third guard flying backward into the last remaining man. The two guards collapse in a heap, struggling to stand. Ma Sok rushes over, stunned, asking if Mujin is alright and where he learned such incredible martial arts. Mujin calmly reassures him, explaining that it wasn't martial arts but skills he picked up surviving on the streets, leaving Ma Sok utterly confused. Watching from the side, Ma Jungbo flips a coin, acknowledging Mujin's impressive skill. He then challenges him to try and dodge his next move, before flicking the coin with immense energy. The projectile shoots past Mujin's head, missing by an inch. Mujin turns, his heart pounding, shocked that such a deadly attack came from a simple coin. Without a moment's hesitation, Mujin snaps into a battle stance as Ma Jungbo dismisses his own men, telling them to get lost because he'll handle this himself. Mujin tries to reason with him, explaining he just wants to talk to their leader, but Jungbo points his sword forward, refusing the request. The leader, he scoffs, isn't someone you can just meet so casually. With that, Jungbo leaps forward, sword raised for a strike. As their weapons clash, a look of pure shock crosses Jungbo's face. He can't believe Mujin is blocking his sword with a pair of chopsticks. Mujin effortlessly reflects the attack, calmly explaining the chopsticks are a useful replacement since he doesn't have a sword. As they clash again, Mujin focuses, recognizing that Jungbo's martial arts are unlike any he's seen before. He quickly spots an opening, a tiny gap in his opponent's defense. Seizing the moment, he lunges and stabs Jungbo's hand with a chopstick. Jungbo screams in pain and disbelief. How could he not only block a sword with chopsticks, but also exploit a momentary weakness? Enraged, he swings his sword wildly, but Mujin leans back, dodging the attack with ease. Jungbo calls him a rat, but Mujin simply spins his chopsticks with incredible skill, warning that underestimating them will lead to a world of hurt. He then unleashes a flurry of attacks, piercing Jungbo in multiple spots. Jungbo's mind reels weren't the rumors true that Mujin couldn't use his internal energy anymore? How could he have reached such a level of skill? As he desperately counterattacks, Mujin sidesteps and lands another precise stab. He explains that he came here curious about the people who put his family in debt, but their pathetic skills are a disappointment. Leaning in close, he pierces Jungbo's elbow and mockingly asks how someone so weak could be so bold. Humiliated, Jungbo jumps back to create distance. He vows to show Mujin the true power of the martial arts he looked down on, though Mujin seems genuinely confused by the accusation. Done with the games, Youngbo roars and engulfs his sword in a powerful energy, preparing for a final, devastating blow. Youngbo unleashes his ultimate secret technique, a devastating descending blow called the Twin Ruinous Force. But as the attack barrels down, Mujin just looks up with a serious expression, thinking that Jungbo is the one who's been playing games this whole time. With shockingly swift footwork, Mujin easily steps aside, completely avoiding the massive strike. Jungbo is floored. How could he have possibly dodged that? Before he can even process it, Mujin raises a fist to counter. In a flash, Mujin's attack sends Jungbo's sword flying from his grasp. Jungbo's mind reels, realizing with dawning horror that this man had been hiding his true strength all along. A devastating punch connects perfectly, sending Jungbo stumbling back, spitting blood in agony. He weakly threatens Mujin, warning him about the consequences of his actions. But Mujin is completely unfazed. He casually tosses a coin, explaining he didn't come for threats and that compliance would be better for Jungbo's health. Catching the coin, Mujin's presence turns menacing as he calmly repeats his purpose. He's just there to borrow some money. After some time, Mujin was calmly smoking from a pipe. As Mujin relaxed with the smoke, he mused that it had been a long time since he'd had this much fun. But his moment of peace was cut short when Ma Sok snatched the pipe from his hand, putting it out while scolding him that such things were bad for his body. Mujin simply sighed, calling it a waste. With that settled, he turned his attention to Ma Jungbo, cutting straight to the point while his guards were being punished in the background. He demanded to know why a group known for being incredibly stingy would support a clan without any collateral. Mujin was certain there was some kind of malicious plan at work. Jungbo nervously denied any ill intent, but Mujin just smirked, saying he could practically hear the gears turning in the man's head. To speed things up, Mujin shook a handful of dice, coldly warning Youngbo to think carefully. He threatened that after swallowing about 30 of them, talking would become impossible. The sheer terror on Youngbo's face was enough. He finally broke. He confessed it was all at the behest of the Cheonghwa Merchant Guild. Mujin wasn't surprised, figuring it was those rats, and pressed for details about their deal. Shaking, Jungbo hesitated, but Mujin rolled a die across the table, reminding him to be loyal to his own subordinates, not some distant guild that wouldn't care if he was chopped to pieces. That did the trick. Jungbo admitted there was a contract. The Cheonghwa Merchant Guild had instructed them to lend the Yomhwa clan as much money as they wanted at the highest possible interest rate, trapping them in an inescapable swamp of debt. Once the clan inevitably fell, the guild promised a satisfying reward, including their land. So, they were holding the land as collateral after all. Mujin glanced at the contract and asked how much the 300 nyang of gold he was borrowing would become in a year. When Jungbo replied it would be around 5,000 nyang, Mujin couldn't help but laugh at the ridiculousness of it all. Tossing the contract aside, he changed the subject, asking about the minor lawless faction. Jungbo explained they were a newer group that had recently joined the Four Heavens Alliance, a union of Sapa sects. Mujin scoffed, calling the alliance a dirty bunch, which earned a confused whisper from Ma Sok, who wondered when he'd ever met them. Mujin brushed it off, saying it was too much of a pain to explain. Growing impatient, he wondered what was taking so long with the money. Just then, the door slid open, and a box containing 300 nyang of gold was delivered. A look of satisfaction crossed Mujin's face as he inspected the gold, confirming it was enough to move forward with his plans. With the gold secured, Mujin confidently told a stunned Ma Sok they were leaving. When Ma Sok questioned if he was really just borrowing the money, Mujin simply told him to take it without another word. As they departed the lending house, he coolly instructed the lenders to record the transaction properly in their ledger. With a stern look, he promised to repay every single debt once his business with their major client, the Cheonghwa Merchant Guild, was finished. He then issued a sharp warning, noting their history of extorting common folk and telling them to knock it off. Clenching his fist, he threatened serious consequences if they ever crossed the line again, causing Ma Jungbo to nervously agree. But as Mujin walked away, Ma Jungbo scoffed, muttering a challenge to the mad young master of the Yomhwa clan. A storm was clearly brewing. Back at the Hua Manor, Steward Do rushed out in a panic, spotting blood on Mujin. Mujin casually dismissed his concern, explaining it wasn't his, and that he'd simply borrowed money to ease their difficult living situation. He stressed the need to feed the remaining warriors well to prevent anyone else from abandoning them. The steward was in disbelief, questioning if Mujin had stolen the gold since the loan syndicate was known for its ruthlessness. Mujin simply reassured him that it was a legitimate loan and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder, telling him to focus on caring for his younger siblings. Leaving the utterly bewildered elders behind, Mujin walked confidently into the manor. Later, he stood before his parents' altar, surrounded by newly lit candles. He quietly admitted that, having never known them, he wasn't sure what to say. While his siblings watched from a distance, he promised to handle the family's financial troubles and take good care of everyone, telling his parents to rest in peace. He then mentioned his upcoming duel with Cheong Dobo over a secret clan manual. How could he possibly win a fight like that? With a sudden fire in his eyes, he vowed to snap his enemies' necks. The next morning, several warriors, guided by Ma Sok, carried a heavy, mysterious object into Mujin's room, signaling the start of his preparations. The warriors grunted as they dropped the heavy boxes, complaining about their aching backs before Ma Sok dismissed them to rest. Mujin, however, opened his door with excitement, thrilled that his delivery had arrived. Inside were 3 swords of increasing weight, 50, 80, and even 110 jian. Ma Sok watched, completely bewildered by what Mujin planned to do with blades so heavy that multiple men struggled to carry them. Mujin simply stated the obvious: swords are for swinging. He grabbed the lightest one to start, but his confidence quickly crumbled. Ma Sok watched in disbelief as Mujin couldn't even lift the 50-gun sword with one hand. Despair washed over Mujin as he cursed his rotten body. How could he possibly be ready for a duel like this? Refusing to give up, he gripped the sword with both hands, his body shaking with the strain until he finally managed to raise it. He then ordered Ma Sok to stop staring and to start preparing all his meals with meat. Ma Sok's worry only grew as Mujin dragged the sword inside and began wrapping his hands to the hilt with cloth. With only half a month left until the duel, Mujin knew this was his last chance. His body, a heavenly martial constitution, was completely incompatible with his master's demonic arts. His only path to survival was to master the 9 swords of Dugu, a style passed down from his master's friend. With grim determination, he began to swing the impossibly heavy sword, pouring all his focus into this one desperate hope. Elsewhere, Cheong Dobo calmly played an instrument as a subordinate delivered a report. He was impressed to hear that Mujin had single-handedly wiped out the Lone Syndicate. Though puzzled how someone without a Dantian could possess such power, Dobo simply smirked, acknowledging that class is permanent. With a sinister laugh, he decided he should prepare a little gift for the young master, eagerly anticipating the day of their duel. With a dark grin, Dobo sat menacingly, his mind already fixated on their future confrontation. Mujin pushed himself relentlessly day and night, honing his footwork and perfecting his powerful kicks and jumps. He continued to train despite his injuries, leaping high into the air with fierce determination. He believed his heavenly martial body, a gift from the heavens, should be able to withstand this much pain, right? Inside a training room filled with complex contraptions, he saw that Ma Sok had prepared everything he asked for. Bamboo sticks and heavy logs hung from the ceiling. With intense focus, Mujin knew the real training was about to begin. He dashed forward, executing a piercing sword form with unwavering resolve, feeling as though not even a mountain could block his path. Rotating smoothly, he raised his sword for a powerful breaking form, swinging in a wide arc, ready to shatter any weapon that came his way. But the strain was immense, his body was already screaming its limits. Gritting his teeth through the pain, he saw a ball-like object launch toward him and knew he had to endure. With a powerful kick, he sent the projectile flying, watching it ricochet chaotically around the room. The ball's path created a dizzying pattern before it shot straight for his face. In a flash, Mujin unleashed his sky-cleaving form, cleanly slicing the object into 4 pieces, confident his sword could split the very heavens. Just as he caught his breath, another ball struck him hard from behind. He cried out in pain and frustration, but immediately pulled a rope, ready for the next challenge. Just as he braced himself, a new threat emerged. Sharpened bamboo sticks shot out from the walls. Without hesitation, Mujin blocked the volley and swung his sword with all his might, unleashing the void-cleaving form. He was confident that no martial art could withstand its edge, believing that the simplest swordplay could counter any complex technique. He masterfully deflected the bamboo, sending the sticks flying back as projectiles toward the wall. His frustration grew as he realized he hadn't managed to land a single hit on the trap's mechanism, but then one of the bamboo spears finally severed a rope. Suddenly, the victory felt hollow as massive logs began to plummet from the ceiling. Could this training get any more intense? Mujin steeled himself, raising his sword to execute the army slaughtering form. He believed that even a horde of enemies would kneel before his blade, that numbers meant nothing against true strength. With expert precision, he slashed through the falling logs, splitting them apart mid-air only for a single, stray log to comically smack him right on the head. His patience finally snapped. Eyes glowing with rage, Mujin roared in frustration, demanding the next challenge. He furiously swung his sword, demonstrating one advanced form after another. He unleashed a technique so precise it could split a floating leaf, followed by a barrage of attacks powerful enough to open the earth itself. He then paused. After this incredible display, he dropped his sword and collapsed, utterly exhausted. Lying on the ground, he reflected on the final form, the self-cleaving form, feeling he had cut all that was left, including himself and his sword, leaving no reason to continue. He closed his eyes, realizing it was all just mimicry. His mind drifted back to his master, who had taught him this final technique. The younger Mujin had questioned its worth, finding the explanations of cutting the earth and sky unbearably cringy and sounding like something a kid made up just to sound cool. His master, slightly embarrassed, couldn't deny the technique sounded childish. But he grew serious, explaining this was the legacy of his only rival, a dear friend whose swordsmanship deserved to live on. Since he couldn't carry on the legacy himself, he wanted Mujin to take it up instead. Mujin was stunned to learn this legendary swordsman who could go toe-to-toe with his master had no inner power. The master explained his friend likely used a low-grade martial art called moving internal skill, which builds strength purely through physical movement. His friend had insisted it be passed to someone outside a sect, as only they could truly master it. Mujin scoffed at the idea of using such a trash-tier method, earning a sharp flick on the forehead from his master. Fed up, the master told him to just shut up and listen, and Mujin reluctantly agreed. The path was simple but grueling. 1,000 swings would begin to change his body, 100,000 would let him emit a sword aura, and after 1,000,000 swings, few under heaven could match him. Mujin quickly calculated that he could master it in 3 years by practicing 1,000 times a day. But could this man really have been as strong as his master? His master confessed that if they had ever fought to the death, one of them would have certainly perished. The thought left Mujin gazing at the night sky, now deeply curious about the man behind the legend. Suddenly, Mujin was jolted back to the present by repeated slaps to his face. It was Ma Sok, desperately trying to wake him. Just as Ma Sok reared back for a full-on punch, Mujin's eyes snapped open, warning him to stop. Ma Sok, relieved, explained he was just worried since Mujin wouldn't get up. Sitting up, Mujin felt a wave of frustration. He had fainted after just one sword form. He had such a long road ahead. Ma Sok offered him a late meal, but Mujin's face fell when he saw it was pork. Ma Sok reminded him he'd asked for meat, but Mujin had new demands. Starting tomorrow, he wanted beef to build muscle, telling Ma Sok to use funds from the loan syndicate and not to worry about the cost. He declared he would eat 3 meat meals a day until his fight with Chong Dobo. As they ate, Ma Sok couldn't help but ask when he'd started learning martial arts. Mujin just smirked, acknowledging how strange it must seem for a guy who was barely functional to suddenly be mastering sword techniques. Ma Sok couldn't hide his amazement, recalling how Mujin had gone from knowing 0 martial arts to taking down loan shark guards with a single chopstick. When Mujin started to joke about being the Divine Demon, Ma Sok quickly cut him off, tired of the nonsense. Getting serious, Mujin then confessed his one true fear that he might lose his memory again, change into someone else, and just disappear without a word. Worried, Ma Sok had to ask if he was planning on abandoning the Yeomhwa clan. Mujin firmly put his chopsticks down, promising he would never leave them. In fact, he declared his new goal was to make the Yeomhwa clan the strongest martial family in all of Sichuan. Ma Sok was completely stunned, calling the idea ridiculous. In response, Mujin just reached over and flicked him on the forehead, leaving a comically large bump. After telling him to get out, Mujin was left alone with his thoughts, hoping this grand ambition would be enough for the original Hua Mujin too. Meanwhile, in the Elder's room, Steward Du and Elder Zhou discussed the duel with Chong Dobo, now just 10 days away. Steward Du was certain their opponent would try to kill Mujin and seize the Yam Emperor's inheritance. But then Elder Zhou suggested something shocking. What if they just ran away? He couldn't bear the thought of losing the last 2 remaining members of the Hua family. How could they possibly protect them from such a deadly threat? Mujin pushed himself relentlessly, swinging his sword until his lungs burned and he was completely out of breath. He paused for a moment, his body screaming for rest, but his mind was racing. Looking down at the heavy iron sword in his hand, he noted the muscle he'd built. He could finally wield the massive blade with just one arm. But what was the point of all this strength? He glanced at the wall, scarred and battered by his practice strikes, and a wave of frustration washed over him. Despite his power, his sword technique felt unstable and weak. With the martial arts competition only a week away, a knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. Just then, a voice called out his name. He turned to see his little brother and sister standing in the doorway, their small faces filled with concern. He told them to go play somewhere else, warning them that it was dangerous here. But his sister Soyeonyeon stepped forward, her voice trembling as she admitted she was worried. She'd been watching him train for days and feared he was overdoing it. A flashback hit her, and she remembered the cruel words she'd thrown at him in a moment of anger, blaming him for their parents' death. Was he pushing himself so hard because of what she said? She confessed that she was just so angry back then, leaving Mujin momentarily speechless. Seeing their worried faces, Mujin's thoughts softened. They always reminded him of his family. He gently patted both of their heads, reassuring them that it was fine and they shouldn't worry. Suddenly, his little brother Dojin's eyes lit up, and he excitedly mimicked Mujin's stance, declaring how amazing it looked. His sister playfully corrected his form, telling him to stretch his arm out more. A small smile touched Mujin's lips as he watched them. The kid was cute, trying to imitate him. This simple, innocent moment sparked a memory. Seeing them reminded him of when he used to train with his master. He recalled his master's voice, explaining the secret to the solitary 9 swords. It wasn't just about strength, it was about the breath. Exhale long when swinging, hold steady, and then inhale slowly when returning to position. It all came rushing back. The breathing method of the pupil. How could he have forgotten something so fundamental? A jolt of realization ran through him as he grabbed his sword with renewed purpose. He turned to his siblings, his voice now filled with confidence, and promised them he would win the competition. With a gentle push, he ushered them out of the room, needing to focus. As Mujin firmly closed the door, his siblings shared a nervous laugh outside. That rainy night, a new resolve settled over him, ready to correct his path. With a new fire in his heart, Mujin began his training in earnest. His focus was absolute as he moved through the motions, his mind centered on one thing, his breathing. He reminded himself to exhale long and steady with every swing of the sword, holding the position without rushing. Then, as he brought the blade back, he would inhale slowly and shortly. This methodical practice was the foundation of everything. Soon, his training paid off. Gathering all the internal energy he could muster, he unleashed it in a single, powerful strike that perfectly split a wooden log. Watching the pieces fall, a quiet sense of success washed over him, and he took a deep breath, ready for more. He was practicing a qigong technique known as pupil, which builds internal energy through direct physical movement. Setting his feet firmly, he swung his sword in a powerful arc. You see, compared to other methods that use meditation to circulate energy, pupil was considered a lower-class martial art because it wasn't great for developing one's energy channels. But for Mujin, it was everything. As he pointed his sword at a stone statue, he knew the most important part of awakening this power was a stable breathing method. With a powerful gaze, he channeled his energy and delivered a devastating strike that completely shattered the statue. Unlike before, when swinging the sword felt like a struggle, his body was gradually stabilizing, all thanks to his breathing aligning with the sword technique. He repeated the training dozens of times, and slowly but surely, the Dantian energy that had been scattered for years began to condense. Meanwhile, Ma Sok was preparing a hearty meal for him when Elder Joe appeared, asking if the young master was still at it. Ma Sok couldn't hide his pride, explaining that Mujin was like a completely different person now. At first, he kept collapsing, but now he never even shows a hint of fatigue. Ma Sok excitedly credited the divine energy treatment from Wudong, believing it had been incredibly effective. But Elder Joe seemed confused, placing a hand on his head. How could a single treatment from Wudong Baekson cause such a dramatic improvement so quickly? It just didn't seem right. He warned Ma Sok to report any problems immediately before leaving. A little later, Ma Sok rushed to the training grounds with food, calling out that it was time to eat. But as he entered, he froze. The entire area was in shambles, and standing tall in the middle of the destruction was Mujin, looking stronger than ever. Stammering in disbelief, Ma Sok asked what on earth had happened to the place. Mujin, however, was completely unfazed, simply stating that the area was now too narrow for him to continue his training. With a new fire in his eyes, he declared his intention to use the main training ground from now on. When they arrived, the main training ground, the warriors already training there were clearly annoyed by the interruption. Mujin announced their presence, and Ma Sok politely relayed the young master's request to use the large training ground. You could practically see the veins bulging on the warriors' foreheads as they seethed with frustration. To make his point, Mujin planted his sword firmly into the ground with an air of absolute authority. He told the warriors he needed to train alone and pointed them toward a different nearby ground. Their anger boiled over as they silently fumed, thinking this half-dead corpse, who had never even shed a drop of blood in battle, had no right to order them around. Mujin, however, noticed their challenging glares. As one of the warriors started to speak up, a senior warrior named Keelboin, the commander of the death squad, silenced him. Keelboin ordered his men to step back, dismissing Mujin's behavior as another bout of madness. But was Mujin really going to let them just walk away after that? As they turned to leave, he called out, stopping Keelboin in his tracks by calling him a dull talent. With a menacing gaze, Mujin challenged him, saying that if he had a complaint, he should say it to his face instead of bottling it up like a coward. Keelboin coldly asked what he was suggesting. Mujin simply replied that among men who live by the sword, there's only one way to handle complaints. They had to fight it out. Shailboyne initially refused, arguing that no warrior would ever draw their sword against the future clan head. But Mujin wasn't having it. He taunted the commander, comparing him to a scared, barking dog and telling him to live with his tail between his legs if he wasn't going to fight. That was the final straw. Provoked beyond his limit, Shailboyne unsheathed his sword, pointing it directly at Mujin and warning him that he would live to regret this moment. But even with the sword pointed right at him, Mujin didn't seem bothered in the slightest. He simply settled into his own battle stance, completely unfazed by the threat. He calmly stated that regret wasn't something he was familiar with, basically challenging the old man to try and make him feel it. Ma-seok watched with a worried heart as Shailboyne challenged Mujin, warning him that regret would be useless now. But Mujin simply stated he wasn't the type to feel regret. As Shailboyne dropped his scabbard to the ground, Mujin did something shocking. He planted his own sword in the earth, preparing to fight completely unarmed. Shailboyne lunged with a powerful slash, but Mujin effortlessly dodged and shoved his opponent's head down. The surrounding warriors were stunned, murmuring in disbelief that he was fighting without a sword and using such strange, unpredictable moves. The fight continued with Shailboyne attacking relentlessly and Mujin evading every blow with swift, expert movements. A distressed Ma-seok covered his eyes, calling out to his young master. Growing frustrated, Shailboyne yelled at Mujin to stop dodging and face him with his sword. Agreeing, Mujin landed beside his weapon. Shailboyne spun his own blade, bitterly recounting his 25 years of service and blaming Mujin for the clan's downfall. With that, Mujin finally grabbed his sword. He raised it to meet his accuser, who sneered, questioning how he could dare preach about martial arts after all that had happened, and prepared his next move. Telling Mujin to know his place, Shailboyne's confidence completely shatters as he feels his own internal energy shaken by Mujin's technique. Clenching his fist, Mujin acknowledges that while Shailboyne's words were true, things were about to change, and with a single, devastating punch, he sends his opponent flying. As Shailboyne's vision darkens, he can't comprehend what just happened. He sees it then, a stark difference in Mujin's gaze, the eyes of a true warrior burning with resolve. The crowd erupts in stunned silence, wondering if their young master actually won. As warriors rush to their fallen brother's side, one angrily accuses Mujin of being a coward for fighting a man who couldn't use his full strength. Mujin stood confidently, stating that no one would complain now. One angry warrior called him a coward for fighting an opponent who couldn't use his full strength, but Shailboyne immediately silenced him. Spitting blood, Shailboyne knelt and conceded defeat, offering Mujin a respectful salute. He admitted he had learned a valuable lesson and, showing his loyalty, ordered everyone to the next training ground. Mujin then told Ma-seok to leave as well. As the warriors departed, one grumbled that even for a young master, this was going too far. As the warriors walked away, one questioned Shailboyne for holding back, but Shailboyne shot back that he was actually planning to half-kill Mujin. His companion was stunned, but Shailboyne insisted he wasn't joking. He then mused that their mad young master must have stumbled upon some kind of heavenly opportunity. Ma-seok, overhearing this, was puzzled, wondering when Mujin could have had such a chance. Ultimately, he looked to the sky and decided that since the young master had changed, it was probably for the best. Later that night at the Hua Manor, a heavy atmosphere hangs in the air. Elder Joe stands solemnly, his thoughts consumed by the impending duel with the Changhua Merchant Guild. He's soon joined by Steward Do, and they reminisce about their 37 years of service. They recall the unmatched power of their lord, Yongjae, whose radiance was so great that even the arrogant Tang clan had to acknowledge his might. Both men had sworn their lives to him, but now Elder Joe sadly accuses the steward of breaking that very vow. Steward Do insists this isn't betrayal, it's a desperate measure to ensure their lord's bloodline and legacy survive. Elder Joe understands, his voice filled with 17 years of exhaustion from tending to Mujin's madness and watching their clan wither away. He believes even Lord Yongjae wouldn't blame them for this difficult choice. With preparations for their departure nearly complete, just a little silver, a few warriors, and 4 clan tokens are all that remain. Steward Do tells Elder Joe to go on ahead. But why would he stay behind? The steward explains that someone must remain to tend to Mujin's body after the duel, as he is still their lord's son. He reveals that the Changhua Merchant Guild has even hired a master to witness the event, aiming to make their theft of the clan official. Elder Joe is disgusted by their audacity, but Steward Do knows it's a calculated move to legitimize their takeover. Steward Do looks down, his heart heavy, thinking of the Changhua Merchant Guild as vicious snakes who would burn everything to the ground. He resolves to go to the agreed-upon spot, worrying that the 2 young ones are already in for a huge shock. The next morning, as the sun rises, Mujin and Ma-seok are eating breakfast. Mujin complains that the meat feels tough, and Ma-seok explains that it's just cheap cuts, blaming the chief steward for their lack of funds. Mujin teases him, asking if he's sulking about getting punched earlier, but Ma Sok denies it. Putting his chopsticks down, Mujin changes the subject, proudly showing off his new clothes and asking for an opinion. With a comically swollen head, Ma Sok deadpans that he looked better with the bandages on. After another hit leaves Ma Sok with a new bulge, Mujin decides it's time to go. Sword on his back, he and Ma Sok head out, only to be met by Steward Du. The steward asks if they're really going through with it, but Mujin cuts him off, warning him not to repeat the same nonsense about running away. He confidently declares he'll be back after beating the thieves to a pulp. To Mujin's surprise, Steward Du respectfully asks to accompany them. Mujin silently sizes him up, thinking the old man worries far too much since he plans to handle everything himself anyway. With a silent agreement, the large manor gates swing open, and the three of them, Mujin, Ma Sok, and Steward Do, march out together ready to face what lies ahead. A martial duel between the Cheonghwa Merchant Company and the Yeonhwa family was about to begin, drawing a massive crowd buzzing with excitement. People hurried to place their wagers, with many believing the Yeonhwa family's martial artists were the safer bet. One man even confidently put down 2 silver coins on the young master, Huang Gong, whose arrival was announced to cheers. Just then, Mujin strolled into the scene, casually eating a piece of candy. His mere presence sent a ripple of unease through the crowd, so much so that the man who just bet on Huang Gong immediately tried to cancel his wager. Mujin coolly reassured Steward Du that he wasn't late, though the steward was clearly worried about his drinking right before a duel. He then came face to face with Bu Choyon, who appealed to their shared bloodline, asking if this fight was truly necessary. The crowd began to murmur, believing the rumors that the Yeonhwa family had recklessly started this conflict. Hearing this, Mujin realized they were being intentionally framed as the aggressors. He decided he had no choice but to return the favor. Pointing his candy stick forward, Mujin declared loudly that they were forced to fight because the Cheonghwa Merchant Company coveted the Yeonhwa family's secret art. His words instantly sowed confusion and suspicion among the onlookers. Bu Choyon shot him a stern glare, silently wondering how long his composure would last. Before the tension could escalate further, a man named Han Ik-gang of the Gongdong clan called for everyone's attention, introducing himself as the official witness for the duel and solidifying the gravity of the event. As the crowd cheered, Hua Mujin of the Yeonhwa family faced Chung Dobo on the stage, both honor-bound to fight fairly. Dobo immediately tried to get under his skin, smugly noting that Mujin had received the items he sent. Confused, Mujin questioned him. Dobo clarified that the battle uniform Mujin was wearing was a gift he had personally sent to commemorate his glorious return. Unfazed, Mujin simply acknowledged his words and gripped the hilt of his massive sword. Dobo pushed further, warning that once the duel ended, Mujin would have to return all the other valuables as well. As Mujin rested the giant blade on his shoulder, the crowd buzzed with confusion. They wondered aloud if the Yeonhwa family's master was truly a swordsman and questioned how anyone could wield such a large weapon. Weren't the Yeomji supposed to be experts in bare-handed combat? Elsewhere, a worried Steward Du asked Ma Sok if the young master had said anything significant. Ma Sok confessed he'd suggested running away that morning, which had sent Mujin into a rage. Shocked, Ma Sok quickly backtracked, insisting he was only joking and truly believed Mujin would win. But privately, his heart sank. Was it a mistake not to run? Could someone really change so suddenly? Steward Do shared his unease, quietly wondering if this newfound confidence was just a contagious madness. Their thoughts were cut short as an announcer called out, asking if both sides were ready. Mujin gave a slight bow of confirmation. With that, the gong sounded, signaling the start of the duel. In an instant, Mujin exploded forward, lunging at Dobo with his sword. Dobo barely had time to react, parrying the strike as their blades clashed with incredible force. The sheer speed of the opening move left the entire audience, including a wide-eyed Steward Du and Ma Sok, completely stunned. As the two fighters readied themselves, the crowd whispered in confusion. Wasn't the young master supposed to be sick and completely untrained? Where on earth was this incredible power coming from? This unexpected show of strength clearly annoyed Dobo, who dismissed it as the clumsy skill of a novice and lunged forward. Their blades met in a furious, high-speed exchange, a blur of attacks and parries across the stage. Mujin narrowly dodged a devastating blow, getting away with only a minor cut on his face as the crowd erupted in cheers. From a high vantage point, Bu Choyon watched in surprise, impressed that Mujin was enduring so. With a focused glare, Chung Dobo promised that this time he would leave Mujin crippled. He took pride in his ability to crush a person's will, and he prepared his sword to do just that. Dobo then dashed forward, unleashing a powerful attack, but Mujin expertly defended and dodged the blow. From the stands, Steward Du expressed his surprise that Mujin was holding on so well, while Ma Sok hinted that the young master might not be going all out. Having secretly watched Mujin train, he believed something far more massive and powerful might soon be revealed. Meanwhile, Mujin was deep in thought, assessing his own strength and realizing he was about evenly matched with his opponent. Was it too much to expect more progress in such a short time? Wiping sweat from his brow, he pushed the thought aside. It didn't matter if his opponents were stronger. In the end, he had always finished them. With renewed determination, he swung his sword, deciding this time would be no different. The two fighters clashed with immense power, their excitement a fiery blaze. As their blades met again, Mujin's resolve hardened into a single chilling thought. He would definitely kill him. Elder Joe followed a set of directions, traveling from a humble hut toward a specific hawthorn tree before finally arriving at his destination with a carriage. He sighed in relief, grateful that the two children he was transporting had fallen asleep, making the journey much easier. Before leaving, he urged Steward Du to join him, but the steward firmly refused. He explained that someone had to stay behind to gather the remains of his young master, Hua, as it was his duty to a blood relative. With solemn resolve, Steward Do declared he would personally oversee the young master's final journey. Elder Joe respected his decision, agreeing to meet him later at a prearranged location. But now, in the present, Elder Joe is filled with doubt, wondering if he made the right choice. The scene shifts to an intense clash of swords between Mujin and Chong Dobo. As they traded blows, Mujin coolly assessed his opponent, thinking that while Dobo wasn't bad for his age, he was still just a greenhorn. The crowd, however, saw something different. Onlookers murmured in confusion, wondering why the two were so evenly matched, with some even thinking Mujin had the upper hand. They gossiped that the famed second son of the Cheonghua Merchant Guild wasn't so impressive after all. Hearing their whispers, Dobo's face twisted with annoyance. Fueled by anger, he charged forward, swinging his sword wildly. Steward Do and Ma Sok cried out in alarm, desperately urging Mujin to dodge the furious attack. Instead of retreating, Mujin calmly executed the first form of the Peerless Nine Swords, a technique called preemptive step, and effortlessly blocked the incoming strike. The crowd gasped as Mujin didn't just block the attack, he immediately launched a fierce counteroffensive. Dobo was completely overwhelmed, stumbling backward across the stage under the relentless assault. A confident smirk played on Mujin's lips, only fueling Dobo's growing frustration as he cursed the madman before him. Pushed to his limit, Dobo began to emanate a powerful aura, gathering every last drop of his inner energy for a final, decisive blow. From the stands, Steward Du watched with wide eyes, realizing his young master was going all in. But could raw power alone turn the tide? As the audience held its breath, Mujin simply found the display too slow. Before Dobo could even unleash his attack, Mujin moved, executing the second form of the Nine Swords' weapon destruction. Their blades clashed, and Dobo's heart sank as he realized just how helpless he was. He couldn't believe he was losing to someone he considered an energy core, less nobody. As Mujin pressed his advantage, cracks spiderwebbed across Dobo's sword until, with a final, devastating push, it shattered completely. Mujin's blade slashed across Dobo's hand and followed up with a powerful kick that sent Dobo flying back. Dobo was sent flying, crashing hard onto the ground as his severed hand landed nearby with a sickening thud. A scream of pure rage tore from Bu Choyon's throat, while Steward Do and Ma Sok could only stare in stunned confusion. Ignoring the chaos, Mujin calmly walked past the bleeding Dobo and picked up the severed arm. He raised it high, declaring it was payment for a 17-year-old grudge. Bu Choyon was terrified by his words, and he twisted the knife further by sarcastically suggesting her powerful guild might find a way to reattach it. Just then, Han Ik-gang leaped onto the stage, rushing to Dobo's side and infusing him with energy. As Bu Choyon ran to her son, Han Ik-gang delivered the devastating news. Dobo's energy core was completely shattered. Turning to Mujin, he demanded to know why he had to go so far when the match was clearly already over. Mujin just scoffed, retorting that he had plenty to say on that topic. He furiously questioned if it was necessary for them to use the Seven Wounds fist strike on a defenseless 5-year-old child all those years ago. This, he explained, was merely closure for that grudge and a warning. From now on, they would all pay the price for provoking the Hua clan. With a final command for them to prepare themselves, Mujin turned and walked away, leaving Bu Choyon to collapse in terror. As she clenched her fist, silently vowing that she would never forget this, the crowd erupted into cheers, celebrating Mujin's overwhelming victory. The crowd buzzed with disbelief, murmuring about how Mujin had crushed a Kongdong sect disciple with a sword art they had never seen before. As they hailed the birth of a new martial master, Steward Do and Ma Sok rushed to his side, addressing him with newfound respect. Mujin simply told them it was time to head back, and as he walked away, the steward couldn't help but notice how much broader and more reliable his back now seemed. Suddenly, Mujin called out to him, and a cold sweat broke out on the steward's brow. Did he already know about their plan to run away? Mujin's question, however, was far more practical. He just wanted to know if the gold he'd entrusted to the steward was all spent. Relieved, Steward Do stammered that a little was left. Mujin mused that he'd have to visit the Bangho sect again for funds before adding one more thing. He stated he didn't care if Elder Joe and the other warriors chose to leave the clan, but if they ever tried to separate him from his younger siblings, he turned back with a look of pure ice, warning that they would have to wager their lives. But what about the others who were already waiting at the rendezvous point? Back at their meeting spot, Elder Joe was struggling to read a message from a messenger pigeon while Soyeon and Dojin complained loudly, upset they had missed their brother's duel. As he finally read the note, Elder Joe froze in sheer panic. The message was short and brutal. Mujin had won the duel, their escape plan had been discovered, and they were to return immediately. His heart sank as he realized they were completely and utterly screwed. If you like this video, you will love a story about a down-on-his-luck rookie and a secretly alive corpse who can't coordinate their own limbs, possibly conquer the brutal war of corpses? Follow Yus and the deadliest mercenary who shouldn't exist, Eleonora, as they cheat death, clash with necromancers, and try to win a championship that could cost them everything. Click here now to see if this impossible pair can prove everyone wrong.